There was a moment, just one, when I hesitated at the threshold of that ballroom. The air smelled of aged champagne and something sharper, like ambition polished to a shine. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of black ties and silk gowns, each stitch whispering of old money and unspoken rules. My heels sank slightly into the plush carpet, a silent reminder that every step forward was a step deeper into their world. And then I saw her, my fiancé's mother, already watching me from across the room, her gaze as cold and precise as the diamonds at her throat, that I quote, dressed carefully that night. The emerald green gown was tailored to my curves, the fabric expensive enough to pass inspection, but I knew the truth, no amount of silk could stitch me into their tapestry. My fiancé squeezed my hand, his smile easy, oblivious to the way his mother's lips tightened just a fraction when our eyes met. She sees it, I thought, the cracks in my armor, the way my posture betrayed years of fighting to be in rooms that weren't built for me. The weight of her stare pressed down like a hand on my shoulder, pushing me back toward the door dot around us. Laughter bubbled like champagne, effortless, practiced. The men spoke in low tones about portfolios and philanthropy, their words laced with the confidence of men who'd never had to prove they deserved a seat. The women moved like swans, their elegance a language I'd spent years trying to translate. I caught fragments of conversation, such a charitable evening. Darling, the foundation simply adores your work. Each phrase a needle pricking at my resolve. Do they hear it? The slight rasp in my voice when I force it too high. The way my fingers twitch when I reach for a flute of champagne, afraid I'll hold it wrong. Then she was there, close enough that I caught the scent of her perfume, something floral, expensive, her. Her lips brushed my ear, her voice a velvet blade. You don't belong here. 3 words.
Three syllables that should have shattered me. But here's the thing about being the girl who was always told she didn't fit. You learn to turn their doubt into your foundation. I didn't flinch, I didn't pull away.
I just smiled, slow, deliberate, and let my gaze flick to the stage where the auctioneer was already stepping up to the podium dot. Because here's what they didn't know. I'd spent months crafting a deal that would change everything. A $7 million partnership signed and ready to be announced. And I was about to close it at her table dot. So tell me, when was the last time someone told you you didn't belong? And what did you do next? Because the truth isn't in their words, it's in what you build after you hear them. The moment my heels touched that marble floor, I knew every step would echo with the weight of a truth I'd spent years trying to outrun. I wasn't born for this world. The air smelled of aged whiskey and orchids, the kind of fragrance that clings to old money like a second skin. Around me, women draped in couture, moved with the effortless grace of swans, their laughter a melody I couldn't quite decipher. My dress, impeccable, my posture, practiced, my confidence, a house of cards in a hurricane. I reached for my champagne flute, the crystal cold against my fingers, and let the bubbles burn my throat like a punishment. Why did I think I could belong here? The question coiled around my ribs, tightening with every sideways glance, every hushed comment behind manicured hands. My fiancé squeezed my arm, his silent way of saying, "You're fine," but his mother's gaze was a blade pressed between my shoulders. She didn't need to speak. Her lifted chin, the way her pearls caught the light like a warning. It all screamed what her lips wouldn't dare say yet. You are an imposter, Dot. And the worst part, for a heartbeat, I believed her. Because how could I not? These people had been bred for boardrooms and legacy trusts, while I'd been raised on ramen budgets and the kind of hustle that leaves calluses on your soul. I'd spent months preparing for this deal, but no PowerPoint could teach me how to wear privilege like a second skin. The clink of silverware against china sounded like a countdown. Tick, tick, tick. Any second, they'd see through me. The girl who'd once cried in a bathroom stall because her debit card declined at a client lunch. The girl who still Googled which fork to use 10 minutes before walking in tonight. But then something shifted. Not in the room, in me. Because beneath the doubt, beneath the sting of their judgment, there was a fire they couldn't see. The same fire that had turned no's into contracts, that had built empires from nothing but grit, and a refusal to stay in the boxes they'd drawn for me. I smoothed my hands over my skirt, feeling the weight of the contract in my clutch. 7 million reasons why I wasn't just here to decorate an arm. The host took the stage, the lights dimmed, and for the first time that night I let myself smile, not because I'd won, but because I knew what they didn't. The right to belong isn't given, it's taken. So tell me, when was the last time you let someone else's opinion write your story? Because here's the truth, they'll never whisper at galas. Your worth isn't in their invitation. It's in what you build when they're not looking. And honey, the best legacies start with the people brave enough to crash the party. There's a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's heavy, thick, with everything you refuse to say. That's the silence I held between my ribs when she leaned in. The air smelled like roses and expensive perfume, the kind that lingers long after the person who wears it has left the room. But in that moment, all I could scent was the sharp, metallic tang of my own pride catching fire. Her voice was a blade wrapped in silk.
You don't belong here. Just 4 words, whispered so only I could hear, like a secret meant to wound, and it did. The clink of champagne flutes, the murmur of polished laughter, it all faded into a hum, white noise against the roar in my ears. You don't belong here, the words settled in my stomach like a stone, cold and unyielding. I could have argued. I could have listed my degrees, my late nights, the deals I'd closed with nothing but grit and a phone that never stopped ringing. I could have reminded her and myself that I wasn't just here by accident. I was here because I'd earned it, but something deeper than anger kept me still. It was the memory of every other time someone had tried to shrink me to fit their idea of enough. The teachers who said I was too loud. The bosses who said I was too ambitious. The voices that hissed I was too much or too little, never just right. And yet here I was. So I smiled. Not the tight, polite smile I'd practiced in the mirror before walking in. Not the brittle one that cracks under pressure. A real one. Slow, deliberate. Because I realized something in that moment, she wasn't telling me I didn't belong. She was telling me she was afraid I did. And that was power. So I let the silence stretch. I let her see that her words didn't break me. Because the truth is, we've all had someone try to hand us a smaller version of ourselves and call it a gift. But here's what they don't tell you. You don't have to wear it. You don't have to prove you belong by shrinking. You prove it by standing exactly as you are, in a room that wasn't built for you, and building a table of your own. And that night, I didn't just pull up a chair. I bought the whole damn room. There was a time when words like hers could have shattered me.
When I was younger, I'd have let that whisper You don't belong here echo in my mind like a verdict, twisting into something I'd carry for years. But that night, as the crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the table, I felt something different rise inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even defiance. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had already survived worse. I thought about the nights I spent hunched over my laptop in a studio apartment, so small the kitchen sink doubled as my bathroom counter. The times I showed up to meetings where men twice my age dismissed me before I'd even spoken. The way I'd clutch my coffee cup a little tighter, straighten my spine, and prove them wrong. Not with arguments, but with results. That's the thing about resilience. It isn't built in grand gestures. It's forged in the moments you choose to keep going, when every instinct screams at you to shrink that. So when her voice slithered into my ear, I didn't flinch. Instead, I let my fingers trace the rim of my wine glass, grounding myself in the present. I thought about the girl I'd been at 22, crying in a parking lot after a boss told me I'd never make it in this industry. And then I thought about the woman I'd become, the one who had just spent 3 months negotiating a deal that would change the trajectory of my company. That deal wasn't just numbers on paper. It was every late night, every doubt I'd silenced, every time I'd chosen to believe in myself, when no one else did that. Here quote as what they'll never tell you about strength. It isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to sit with it, to let it hum in your bones while you do the thing anyway. So I smiled, not the tight, polite kind, but the slow, certain smile of someone who knows the punchline to a joke no one else has heard yet. Because the truth, I didn't need to say a word. My work was about to speak for me, that. And if you're sitting there right now feeling like an outsider in a room full of people who think they get to decide your worth, listen to me. The next time someone tries to tell you where you don't belong, let it fuel you. Let it remind you of every battle you've already won, because the world doesn't reward the loudest voices. It rewards the ones who show up, who build, who outlast. And honey, if you're still standing, that means you're already winning. Now go prove it. The air in that ballroom was electric thick with the scent of aged whiskey, and the faint citrusy bite of bergamot from the centerpieces, their candles flickering like stars trapped in crystal. I could feel the anticipation humming beneath the polished laughter, the way the string quartet's vibrato seemed to tighten with every passing second. My fingers traced the rim of my champagne flute, the condensation cool against my skin, a quiet anchor in a sea of silk and judgment. I had spent years learning to read rooms like this, where power wore Prada and whispers cut deeper than knives. And tonight, the room was about to learn to read me. Then, the lights dimmed just a fraction. A hush rippled through the crowd like a held breath. The host, a man whose voice carried the weight of boardrooms and old money legacy, stepped onto the dais, his smile sharp as the edge of a signed contract. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, and my pulse kicked up, not with nerves, but with the kind of certainty that comes when you've stared down failure and laughed in its face. Tonight we celebrate more than charity. We celebrate vision. His gaze swept the room before landing, deliberately, on me. I didn't flinch. I netted because I knew what was coming. That the words hung in the air for a heartbeat. A groundbreaking $7 million partnership before the room erupted.
Applause crashed like a wave. Glasses clinked, and somewhere to my left, a woman gasped, "Oh my God, that's her!" But I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the way the host's next words wrapped around my name like a victory lap, spearheaded by someone who didn't just see an opportunity but created one. The table vibrated with the energy of it, the crystal trembling, The air alive with the kind of thrill that comes when the underdog doesn't just show up. They rewrite the rules. I let myself breathe it in. The weight of that moment, the way my fiancé's hand found mine under the table, his grip tight with pride, his mother. She sat very, very still, and I smiled. Not the polite, painted kind, the kind that says, I told you without ever saying a word. Here's the truth. They'll never teach you in those glittering rooms. Belonging isn't about the seat you're given, it's about the table you build. And honey, I didn't just pull up a chair tonight. I own the damn room. So tell me what's the table you're meant to claim? And what's stopping you from taking your seat? You want to know how I got there, how I sat at that table, surrounded by whispers and judgment, and still closed a deal that would change everything. Let me take you back, because this wasn't just about one night. This was about every late hour, every doubt I pushed through, and every door slammed in my face before I finally kicked one open myself. That 3 years earlier, I was standing in a cramped office with a laptop that overheated every 20 minutes, pitching an idea no one believed in. My voice shook the first time I asked for funding. The investor didn't even look up from his phone before saying, Sweetheart, this isn't for people like you. That word, sweetheart, stung more than the rejection. It was the same tone I'd hear later at that gala, the same unspoken rule, you don't belong. But here's what they didn't know. I'd already decided that belonging wasn't something they could give me.
It was something I take. I spent months refining my strategy, cold emailing at 2 a.m., showing up to meetings 10 minutes early just to steady my nerves. There were nights I cried in my car after a pitch fell apart, then wiped my face and sent 3 more emails before driving home. I learned to turn no into not yet. I studied the industry until I knew it better than the men who dismissed me. And when I finally got a foot in the door with a company that would become my $7 million partner, I didn't just walk in, I built the damn door. I created a proposal so airtight, so visionary, that they couldn't say no. Not because I was lucky, but because I'd made myself undeniable. The obstacles? Oh, there were plenty. The client who ghosted me after 6 months of work. The competitor who spread rumors that I was too emotional to lead a deal. The moments I questioned if I was really cut out for this. But every setback taught me something. Resilience isn't about never falling, it's about learning how to land. And that night at the gala, when his mother leaned in with her poisoned whisper, I didn't flinch. Because I'd already fought harder battles. I'd already proven to myself that I could turn doubt into fuel, that I could stand in a room full of people who underestimated me and still win. So when the host announced my name, when the applause erupted and the cameras flashed, it wasn't just about the money, it was about every version of me who'd been told she wasn't enough. Finally having the last word. And if you're sitting there right now, feeling like the world's trying to shrink you down to fit its boxes, listen to me. Your legacy isn't built on their permission, it's built on your refusal to accept their limits. So take that doubt, that fear, that whisper telling you you don't belong, and let it light a fire under you. Because the best revenge isn't arguing, it's winning.
And honey, you're just getting started. That the moment the host's voice cut through the hum of the gala. And now a word from the visionary behind tonight's groundbreaking partnership. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers tightened around the stem of my champagne flute, the crystal biting into my skin just enough to ground me. This was it. The second I'd spent months chasing the validation I'd been denied my entire life, now unfolding under the chandelier's golden glow. My pulse roared in my ears, but I forced my shoulders back, my chin up, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to let fear dictate your steps. The spotlight found me before I reached the stage, and for a heartbeat the room blurred. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, some curious, some skeptical, but all watching. I could feel the shift in the air as I moved through the crowd, my heels clicking against the marble like a metronome counting down to my triumph. My fiancé's family sat frozen at their table, their earlier smirks replaced by something far more delicious, uncertainty. His mother's lips parted slightly, her diamond earrings catching the light as she leaned forward, as if willing me to stumble. But I didn't. I met her gaze and held it, just for a second before turning to the stage, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about every late night, every rejected pitch, every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. And here I was, standing in the proof of my own resilience. The microphone was warm in my hand as I stepped into the light, the weight of the contract in my bag feeling like a shield. The audience's murmurs faded into silence, and in that quiet I heard my own voice, steady, unshaken, saying what I'd come to say, but more than that, I felt it, the power of reclaiming a narrative that had never been mine to lose. They thought this stage was too big for me.
Let them watch me fill it, Dodd. And here's what I need you to understand, because this isn't just my story, it's yours too. Every time you've been underestimated, every room you've walked into feeling like an outsider, that's not the end of your story. That's the beginning. The stage is waiting, the spotlight is yours. Now tell me, what will you do when it's your turn to step into the light? As I stepped onto that stage, the weight of every doubt, every whispered judgment, pressed down on me like the heavy silk of my gown, elegant but suffocating. The spotlight burned against my skin, not just illuminating me, but exposing me. For a breath, I was that girl again, the one who had stood frozen in the foyer, hearing his mother's voice slither into my ear like a blade wrapped in velvet. You don't belong here. The words had settled in my ribs, a cold ache I'd carried all evening. But now the stage beneath my feet was more than wood and polish. It was my answer. My fingers trembled just once as they grazed the podium. I didn't clench them into fists. I spread them wide, grounding myself. Because here's the truth. I'd learned the hard way. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear dictate your posture. So I stood taller. I let the hush of the room wash over me. Let the skeptical tilts of champagne-fluted heads fuel me. His mother was out there, her pearls glinting like tiny judgmental moons. His father, arms crossed, a fortress of silent disapproval. Even my fiancé, my love, wore an expression I couldn't quite read, caught between pride and the ghost of his family's expectations. But none of that mattered now, because the microphone in front of me wasn't just a tool, it was my scepter. I took a breath, and with it I swallowed every "you're not enough" I'd ever heard. The air in my lungs turned to fire. This wasn't just about a deal anymore.
It was about every time I'd been underestimated, every door slammed in my face, every side eye from someone who thought my ambition was arrogance. The numbers on the screen behind me, $7 million, weren't just figures. They were the coordinates of my revolution. And as I opened my mouth to speak, I didn't just find my voice. I unleashed it. You want to know what power feels like? It's not the absence of shaking hands. It's the moment you realize the shaking doesn't change the outcome. It's looking into the eyes of the people who doubted you and seeing the exact second they realize they misjudged the storm inside you. So here's what I need you to hear, really hear. Your belonging isn't granted by titles or last names or the cold approval of people who'll never cheer for you. It's carved. It's earned. It's the quiet roar of your own conviction when the world tells you to sit down. And if you're standing there right now, feeling small in a room full of giants, good. Let that feeling burn. Let it forge you. Because the stage isn't for the ones who already fit. It's for the ones brave enough to rewrite the rules. Now tell me, what's your next move? As I stood at that podium, the weight of every whispered doubt, every sideways glance settled into my bones, then ignited into fire. This wasn't just a presentation, it was the culmination of every sleepless night, every no that had ever tried to shrink me. Every moment I'd had to prove I was more than what people saw when they first looked at me. My fingers pressed lightly against the cool wood of the lectern, grounding me as I let the silence stretch just long enough for them to lean in. Then I began, not with numbers, not with corporate jargon, but with the raw truth of why this mattered. I was 12 years old when I first understood what it meant to be told. You don't belong, I said, my voice steady but laced with the kind of emotion that only comes from living it.
A teacher looked at my thrift store shoes and suggested I am lower. A quiet laugh escaped me, but my eyes never wavered from the crowd. Funny how those same shoes carried me through college, then into boardrooms where people assumed I was there to take notes, not make decisions. The room stilled. I could feel it, the shift. They weren't just listening, they were hearing me. And for the first time that night, I wasn't the outsider at the table. I was the one holding the story that would change the game. My vision wasn't just about profit margins or market share. It was about the girl I'd been, standing in the welfare line with my mom, clutching a dream like a lifeline. It was about the woman I'd become, who'd turned "you don't belong" into "watch me build a seat at the table." As I laid out the data, our growth projections, our innovative outreach, the communities we'd uplift, I didn't just present facts. I wove them into the narrative of resilience. This deal isn't just an investment in a company, I told them, my voice rising with the kind of conviction that only comes from betting on yourself when no one else would. It's an investment in the idea that potential isn't determined by your last name or your bank balance. It's determined by who's willing to work hardest when the odds are stacked against them. And then, the kicker, the part where I locked eyes with my fiancé's mother, still seated in the front row, her pearls glinting under the chandeliers. Some people will always see what you lack, I said, softer now, almost intimate, like I was speaking just to her. But the right people, they'll see what you're capable of. The screen behind me flashed our final slide. A 7-figure commitment to education initiatives in underserved neighborhoods, the same neighborhoods that had shaped me. The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it, because in that moment I wasn't just closing a deal.
I was rewriting a story, mine and maybe theirs too. So here's what I need you to hear, really hear. The next time someone tries to make you feel small, don't argue. Don't explain. Build the proof so undeniable that their words become irrelevant. Build the life that makes their doubts look like the small, scared things they always were. And when you sit at their table, smile, because you didn't just earn your place, you redefined what belonging means. As I stood there, my voice steady and my vision clear, something extraordinary began to unfold in the room. The air itself seemed to shift, charged with the weight of my words. I could feel it, the moment my story stopped being just mine and became something bigger, something that reached into the hearts of everyone listening. But no one was more affected than the people at my fiancé's table. His mother's expression was the first to change. That cold, composed mask she wore so effortlessly began to crack. Her eyes, which had dismissed me as an outsider just moments before, now widened in disbelief. I saw the exact second realization hit her, when she understood that the woman she had whispered to, the woman she had tried to diminish, was the same one commanding the room with a vision so powerful it had just secured a 7-figure deal. Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute, her knuckles widening. She didn't look away, she couldn't, because for the first time she was truly seeing me. Around her, the rest of the family mirrored her shock, though in different ways. My fiance's father, usually so stoic, leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed as if recalculating everything he thought he knew. His sister, who had barely spared me a glance all evening, now stared with something like awe. And my fiancé? His eyes never left me. There was pride there, yes, but also something deeper. A quiet apology, a promise that this moment would change everything between us. That's the audience reaction was electric.
Murmurs rippled through the crowd, heads turning toward our table as the host announced the partnership. I could hear the whispers, "That's her, the one who just closed the deal." The energy in the room had shifted from polite indifference to something vibrant, almost alive. But the most powerful reaction was the one I felt inside myself. Because in that moment, I wasn't just proving them wrong. I was proving to myself that I had always belonged. Not because of their approval, but because of my own worth. Dodd. Here quotes what I know now. The people who underestimate you, they're not your audience. Your power isn't in convincing them. It's in outgrowing their doubts. So the next time someone tells you don't belong, don't argue. Don't shrink, just stand taller, speak louder, and let your success be the last word. Because the right people won't just hear you, they'll remember you. And that's how legacies are built. Dodd. The moment the host's voice cut through the murmur of the gala. And tonight, we celebrate an extraordinary partnership, a visionary deal closed right here among us. Time seemed to slow. My fingers tightened around the stem of my champagne flute, not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of what was about to unfold. The room, with its crystal chandeliers and polished silver, had spent the evening whispering that I was an outsider. But in that instant, as every eye turned toward our table, I knew the universe had been saving this moment just for me. The host continued. A groundbreaking $7 million collaboration with my name's firm, securing futures for thousands through this foundation. The words hung in the air like a verdict. No, like a coronation. I didn't glance at my fiancé's mother. I didn't need to. I could feel the shift in the energy around us, the way the air thickened with something electric. The clinking of forks paused, conversations died mid-sentence, and then, like a wave-breaking applause erupted.
Not polite, obligatory clapping, but the kind that rises from the gut, the kind that says, "We see you, we understand now." I finally turned my head just slightly and met her eyes. Her face was a masterpiece of contradictions. Lips parted, brows knit, the carefully constructed mask of superiority cracking. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed, for the first time all night, as if I'd been holding it since the moment I walked in. Because this wasn't just about the deal. It was about every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. Every boardroom where I'd been talked over. Every dinner where I'd been subtly erased. And now here I was, not just at the table, but rewriting the rules of it. My fiancé's hand found mine under the table, squeezing so tightly it almost hurt. His pride was a living thing between us, but it wasn't his validation I needed, it was my own. As the applause swelled, I let my shoulders relax, my spine straighten, my smile soften into something genuine. This wasn't revenge, it was release. The kind that comes when you stop fighting to prove your worth and start embodying it. So here's what I want you to hear, really hear, in this moment. Your belonging isn't granted by titles, or last names, or the cold approval of people who've never had to claw their way up. It's carved from the quiet nights you spent working when no one was watching. It's forged in the fire of every no that almost broke you but didn't. And when your moment comes, and it will, it won't be a whisper. It'll be a roar. So let them underestimate you. Let them doubt. Because the right tables, you don't just earn a seat at them. You build them. And tonight, I didn't just claim my place. I proved that the table was mine all along, that the moment my name echoed through the ballroom. A groundbreaking $7 million partnership, led by none other than my name. I didn't turn to meet their eyes. Not yet.
I let the applause wash over me first, let the weight of the words sink into the polished marble floors, into the stiff spines of the guests who had spent the evening pretending not to notice me. Then, slowly, I exhaled because this wasn't just about the deal. This was about the silence that followed it. The kind that hums with the friction of shifting power, the kind that forces people to see what they've spent years overlooking. His mother was the first to break. I saw it in the way her fingers tightened around her champagne flute, the delicate tremor in her wrist as she set it down. My fiance's father, ever the strategist, cleared his throat and extended a hand, not the limp, obligatory kind, but a firm grip, his eyes locking onto mine with something like respect. Well played, he murmured, and for the first time I heard no condescension in his voice, just the grudging admission of a man who'd built his own empire and recognized the architecture of another. His wife, though, she took longer. Her smile was still painted on, but her gaze flickered between me and the screen, displaying the partnership details, as if recalculating my worth in real time. Then came the questions, not the barbed ones she'd lobbed at me before, but real ones. How did you structure the terms? What's the timeline for implementation? And when I answered, when I spoke about the months of negotiations, the late nights, the risks I'd taken, I saw her lips press into a thin line, not in disapproval, but in something far more unsettling for her recognition. She'd spent years believing my place was on the periphery of their world. Now she was leaning in, her pearls glinting under the chandeliers as she listened, really listened for the first time. My fiance's hand found mine under the table. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. The pride in his eyes was its own language, one we'd both waited too long to speak fluently. And his sister, oh, his sister who'd once accidentally spilled wine on my dress at a family dinner, she raised her glass to me from across the table. No words, just a toast. An apology. A truce. Here quote. See, the truth they couldn't ignore anymore. I'd redrawn it. And in that moment I realized something deeper than the satisfaction of proving them wrong. It was the quiet power of knowing that belonging isn't about their permission, it's about your proof. The deals you close, the grace you carry, the legacy you build brick by brick, even when the world whispers you don't deserve the mortar. So let me ask you this. Where have you been told you don't belong? And what will you build there anyway? Because the right table isn't the one they set for you. It's the one you pull up to, and then expand until there's room for everyone who's ever been told to leave. That's how you turn their doubt into your foundation. And trust me, nothing tastes sweeter than the meal you eat there, long after they've run out of excuses to keep you out. That night, as I stood there with the weight of that $7 million deal settling into my bones, something inside me shifted, not just professionally, but deep in the core of who I believed myself to be. The whispers, the sideways glances, the unspoken "you don't belong," none of it mattered anymore, because in that moment, I realized something far more powerful than any contract or handshake. I had spent years waiting for permission to take up space, and now I no longer needed it. The validation I had craved from his family, from that room full of polished smiles, from every doubter who ever made me feel small, it was irrelevant, because I had just proven to myself more than anyone that belonging isn't granted, it's claimed. The days that followed weren't about gloating or even about justice. They were about waking up and recognizing the woman in the mirror, someone who had walked into a room designed to exclude her and left having rewritten its rules. That deal wasn't just ink on paper, it was the first brick in a foundation I was building for myself, one where my worth wasn't up for debate. I remember sitting in my apartment afterward, the city lights blinking outside, and feeling this quiet, unshakable confidence settle over me. It wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you've been underestimating yourself for far too long. Here quotes what I know now: the people who make you feel like you don't belong. They're often the ones most afraid of what you're capable of. That night, his mother's words weren't about me. They were about her own fear, her own limitations. And in refusing to shrink, in choosing to stand tall and let my work speak for me, I didn't just close a deal. I closed the door on every version of myself that ever doubted I was enough. That's the real victory. Dot. So I ask you, where in your life are you still waiting for permission? Where are you dimming your light because someone else can't handle the glow? This isn't just about boardrooms or galas or seven-figure deals. It's about the quiet moments when you decide, I belong here, not because they say so, but because you do. Your dreams, your ambitions, your unapologetic existence, they are not up for negotiation. And the moment you truly believe that, that's when the world has no choice but to make room. So take it, build it, own it, because the legacy you leave isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how fiercely you believed in yourself when no one else would. And that, my friend, is how you change everything.